Today's sermon is titled Shaking My Agnostic Foundation, to be delivered by Randy Schwalbe. Randy received a BA in music education credential from UCLA and taught high school band for 3 years. Through a music aerospace connection, Randy changed careers, working as that lean guy at Hughes, them Boeing satellites. He has served as music director at 4 different churches, including UU Church of Studio City and the Presbyterian Church here in Cambria. So they threw him out and we took him. Okay. In his retirement, he directs the Follies during Pine Dorado weekend, conducts the Atascadero Community Band, and serves this church as its secretary and chair of the worship committee. Randy and his wife Mary are proud parents of an insane rat terrorist named Master Shifu, and they both enjoy backpacking. Is that Mary or you and the dog? Okay. Enjoy backpacking in the wilderness with Janet Cooper and Sue Davis each summer. Randy.
Thank you, Dolores. Good morning, cherished members of our community. I'm all shook up. Over 40 years ago, I discovered this thing called humanism. It was appealing in that it did not demand any stretching of my belief system, one that would be held in place by this thing called faith. And then, like cruising Highway 66 in an open convertible, footloose and fancy-free, I settled into this other thing called agnosticism. It was a great ride for all these past decades until I saw those pesky flashing red lights in my rearview mirror. So while I'm being pulled over for driving under the influence of free thinking, allow me a little backfill. Several months ago, I stood here and pontificated on the subject of solipsism versus inhumanism. And just a quick review, solipsism is a philosophy in its extreme, places the center of the universe in my head, meaning the very existence of everything depends on my awareness of it. It is apparent that Robson Jeffers, the creator of inhumanism, had a dim response to this solipsism. A quote from that second reading you heard earlier this morning: "It seems time that our race began to think as an adult does, rather than like an egocentric baby or an insane person." Well, that pretty much discounts my entire talk I gave over a year ago about my viewpoint of the universe. Okay, Mr. Jeffers, I turn to your inhumanism. This term does not mean the study of that which works against humanity, or the study of cruel treatment of others. No, instead, it is the antithesis of humanism. In other words, not man. Akin to our seventh principle, Jeffers of the early part of the 20th century promoted the notion that man is merely another puzzle piece in the realm of nature. In spite of our arrogance, man does not have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. That's from Genesis 1:26. Wow. And Jeffers claims that man is not better, smarter, or wittier than nature herself. Just look around. When we carry on footloose and fancy-free with our environment, Lady Nature tends sends us a stern rebuke. Unseasonable rains, extended droughts, extreme snowstorms, and devastating hurricanes. I did not mention earthquakes. That's just Earth adjusting itself in its cosmic desk chair. And like mom attempting to teach us kids about mortality, Ms. Nature unleashes an invisible but deadly virus. Think about it. 66 million years ago, a 7.5-mile wide diameter asteroid slammed into the Gulf of Mexico at 27,000 miles per hour, releasing 325 gigatons of sulfur and 435 gigatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. 80% of life on Earth, including our beloved dinosaurs, vanished as a result. And I'm just pointing out that Ma Nature does not need to hit us over the head with a billy club to put us in our place. We are now running scared from something we cannot even see. But I digress. Another key component of inhumanism is humanism itself and the role religion plays into it. Karen Armstrong, a brilliant author of books covering God, explained the origins of the religious component of the human species in her book titled The History of God. And I quote, "Yet my study of the history of religion has revealed that human beings are spiritual animals. Indeed, there is a case for arguing that Homo sapiens is also Homo religious. Men and women started to worship gods as soon as they became recognizably human. They created religions at the same time as they created works of art. This was not simply because they wanted to propitiate powerful forces, that means pleasing the gods. These early faiths expressed the wonder and mystery that seem always to have been an essential component of the human experience of this beautiful yet terrifying world," unquote. Then Ms. Armstrong leaps to the present in a single paragraph, discussing the current trend of religion. And I again quote, "Religion seems to have been something that we have always done. It was not tacked on to a primordially secular nature by manipulative kings and priests, but was natural to humanity. Indeed, our current secularism is an entirely new experiment, unprecedented in human history. We have yet to see how it will work. It is also true to say that our Western liberal humanism is not something that comes naturally to us, like the anticipation of art or poetry. It has to be cultivated. Humanism is itself a religion without God. Not all religions, of course, are theistic. Our ethical secular ideal has its own disciplines of mind and heart and gives people the means of finding faith in the ultimate meaning of human life that were once provided by the more conventional religions," unquote. At this point, you may think I'm twisting all of you into that proverbial pretzel, so let me clarify. Humanism is all about that which is the human species, beyond just the physical. And according to Armstrong, humanism is being human without an assist from God. Okay, that is humanism tucked into a tiny nutshell. Now, before I continue with Jeffers and his inhumanism, I wish to turn your attention to my religious path of choice, agnosticism. It is highly unfortunate that when either term, agnostic or atheist, is uttered, one often jumps to the immediate conclusion that this person hates God, is a malcontent, a menace to society, an agent of Satan, and an all-around not a nice person. Remember, Ms. Armstrong did mention that men and women started to worship gods as soon as they became recognizably human. So naturally, being agnostic or atheist bucks the trend. And it is highly unfortunate for us agnostics that these God-advocating zealots fail to differentiate the two. What agnostics and atheists have indeed in common is the unwillingness to accept the mysticism that is God. However, while atheists make the claim that God does not exist, end of story, agnostics generally do not have answers about what or who God is. And we are perfectly okay with that. Again, we do not have answers about God, nor do we try to search for answers, or more accurately, create or invent answers. I'm waiting to get smote. All right. Well, while I'm waiting, I'll share a little anecdote with you. Several years ago, I attended a lecture given at the Lavra, hosted by Stephen Lloyd Moffat. During the happy hour portion of the evening, I was standing with several of Steve's colleagues when one of them asked me, "What is the nature of my spiritual path?" They certainly wouldn't phrase it as, "So what religion are you?" That would be crass. I chirpily answered, "I'm a fundamental agnostic." And to my delight, they all laughed. For years, I have been identifying myself as a fundamental agnostic, but they were the first to get the irony of that label. You see, you must believe in something with 100% of your faith in order to add the term fundamental to your belief system. Further, fundamentalists tend to advocate the original structure or precepts of their adopted belief system. And yes, atheists qualify for this designation as well. They believe in the non-existence of God. But a fundamental agnostic? Not possible. If someone were to ask me what I believe in, I would say, I believe I'll have another glass of Bassetti Grenache. The term fundamental agnostic is, after all, an oxymoron. I said oxymoron. I know what you think you heard. Anyway, like dividing by zero, I am able to believe in an infinite number of things or nothing at all. Do you know how liberating that is? I do not need to worry about thinking unholy thoughts or what God thinks about this sermon. I do not fear electrical storms, getting smote and all that. And nor do I worry about the special place down there with my name on it, let alone getting stuck in purgatory prison because my miserly relatives won't pony up the local Catholic church. Spiritually speaking, I am footloose and fancy-free. And I am okay and can accept noted genealogist Lawrence Gardner's claim that it would have been impossible for Jesus, a Jewish rabbi, to be unwed in his day. And I'm okay with the grieving parents of a young girl slain by a stray bullet saying, according to God, it was her time, if that helps to make them feel any better. And I'm okay with the claim that God is omniscient, all-knowing, or omnipotent, all-powerful. And I'm okay with God who looks like the old dude in Gary Larson's Far Side cartoons, or George Burns, or Morgan Freeman. I guess I'm okay with all the begatting going on in Genesis, suggesting all of mankind is the product of an incestuous Big Bang about 6,000 years ago. Another salient feature of agnosticism is its own inability to effectively apostolize. The closest we can come to that is by asking the question, how do you know that? Sadly, we do not have much to preach about. And many of us agnostics, even the fundamental ones, have learned the art of blending in from our friend the chameleon. When I am with a friend or an associate who is passionate about his or her belief system, I can go along without offending the big guy upstairs or risk being overheard by a fellow UU member. Instead of challenging this other person and creating an unpleasant scene over it, I engage in pleasant conversation, letting this other person steer. But most importantly, and this goes for the atheists out there as well, I do not accept the notion of mysticism. I find myself drawn to books like Gardner's The Bloodline of the Holy Grail in which he explains in great detail with citations what very likely happened during the life of Jesus, taking all the magic out of the miracles. I find myself watching videos that explain how magic works, everything from card tricks to major Las Vegas acts such as David Copperfield. Maybe because of some legal requirement, this magic is officially called illusions. And that is sad, because when an illusion is well performed, it looks like absolute magic. But as much as I personally like to know how it is done, so too do I like to explore what drives folks to believe what they do. The skeptic in me wonders how it is that millions of parishioners around the world sit still every Sunday morning to be told what and how to believe. So now I have come this far, and I might suppose that some of you out there may have formulated a challenging question for me after the service. Well, I'll handle one right now. I know one of you is itching to ask me, if everything has an explanation, how do you explain things that science cannot? Good question. For example, does time have a start or finish? If the Big Bang Theory is reality, what was here before? Is there any edge or boundary to the universe? And like an annoying kid, if I ask the why question enough times, science runs out of answers. And in my spiritual world, I like to lasso all those unanswerables together and label it God. And this is the beautiful thing about being agnostic. That corral of unanswerables that I call God falls in line with the essence of agnosticism. There are no answers, and that is okay. But before I get to the big message of the talk, I would like to make mention of two previous talks given here by Dr. Stephen Lloyd Moffat, professor of religious studies at Cal Poly Slow. A couple of years ago, he discussed the God gene. This happens every time. So a couple of years ago, he discussed the God gene. In that sermon, he mentioned a study that took place, and I cannot recall the name of the study or who performed it, but I will attempt to paraphrase it so you get its message. In a classroom, 3 different groups of grade school youngsters were asked to take a timed multiple answer test. The answers to this test were clearly posted on the back wall. The first class was instructed not to look back at the wall where the answers were clearly posted while taking the test. The teacher watched the class as the students took the test. On average, there was no cheating. For the next class, the next study, the teacher left the room after the test began, returning when the time had expired. The vast majority of the students looked back to get the answers. In other words, they cheated. For the final class, the teacher once again left the room, but before leaving, she explained to them that a higher power, maybe God himself, would be watching. Virtually no one cheated. The God gene in action. In another talk, Dr. Lloyd Moffat explained why some people are prone to mystical encounters. Remember that? Conversations with the far beyond or even God himself. The explanation came down to those who spend lots of time meditating in churches, convents, cloisters, etc., will eventually start to hear voices. And the attempt to make sense of it becomes the divine encounter. On the other hand, those who do not spend much time contemplating the mystic will be disappointed. No conversations with the beyond. However, if they backpack, they will hear nature carry on lots and lots of conversations between the chirping birds, the howling wolves, the rushing creeks, the distant thunder. That is the ego mysticism in all its sonic glory. Now comes the earth-shaking epiphany, or maybe it's just a mere distraction caused by the appearance of a shiny object. And that object is indeed ecomysticism. And yes, this term was awarded the red squiggly line by Word Doc spell check as I wrote this sermon. The ecomysticism is a beautiful concept. Imagine replacing all the mystic stuff you have learned about over the years with nature. Imagine replacing the God gene with the nature gene. As an agnostic, not only is this feasible, it is desirable. Ecomysticism, or as some refer to it as spiritual ecology, is defined as a response to the values and socio-political structures of recent centuries, with a trajectory away from the intimacy with the earth and its sacred essence. It has been forming and developing as an intellectual and practice-oriented discipline for nearly a century. Spiritual ecology includes a vast array of people and practices that intertwine spiritual and environmental experience and understanding. Additionally, within the tradition itself resides a deep and developing spiritual vision of a collective human earth divine evolution that is expanding consciousness beyond the dualities of human earth, heaven earth, and mind body. This belongs to the contemporary movement that recognizes the unity and interrelationship, or interbeing, the interconnectedness of all of creation. And by Jove, ecomysticism is something that I can actually believe in. I can accept it without question, without hesitation. But hold on. Before signing on the dotted line, there is one small caveat. The term ecomysticism was the focus of one Robinson Jeffers in his philosophical treatment of religion, calling it inhumanism. So immediately I was drawn to this philosophical study, and lo and behold, God is discussed in detail. I was beginning to feel the foundations of my agnosticism crumble, the underpinnings becoming unpinned, my core belief system shaken and stirred. Sitting before me was Jeffers' writings, and within them a definition of God, an answer that in my zest for the newly adopted notion of ecomysticism was irrefutable. Jeffers said that God does not exist outside or in addition to everything, nor does God exist within everything. God, simply put, is everything. So let that sink in for a moment. Okay, your first reaction might be, well, hey, isn't that just another variant of pantheism? The term pantheism is derived from the Greek roots, in which pan means all and theos means God. Thereby, everything in the universe is within the sphere of God. Mysticism and the supernatural are not limited within this sphere. In his book, The God Delusion, Richard Dawson states that pantheism is sexed up atheism. God is not some old dude pointing a finger at Adam, but the physical whole of the entire cosmos. However, according to Tagnani in his thesis, the subtle adjustment Jeffers makes within his inhumanism philosophy is that not only does God exist, but how God exists. God is not some force that controls everything or is lurking about within everything, but God is everything. If you wore, if you wore a t-shirt that reads, "I am God," you would be correct. Placing a placard in front of a rock at a gem show with the word God inscribed on it is also correct. And there you have it. Here, I thought I was safe from the burdens of believing in mystical creeds buoyed by the lapping waves of faith. But now I must contend with this inhumanistic notion of a God that actually makes sense to me. And to boot, it is rather difficult, if not impossible, to refute the notion that God is everything without delving into the murky waters of mysticism. And yet many have, including sources very close to me. And therein lies the problem, or better put, the lack of public energy inhumanism has garnered over the past 100 years. And Robinson Jeffers is not a household name, but should be. Why this lack of interest? First, the term inhumanism, marketing-wise, is an immediate turnoff. It does not have that sweet sounding lilt as does Lutheran or Methodist or Presbyterian. Second, the philosophy, in particular, the definition of God, does not fit the collective narrative. Why is this important? Well, just imagine for some crazy reason, humanism suddenly became a widely known and sought after religion. All the other mystic-based religions would go by the way of the Swiss movement wristwatches. 95% of the market share dropping to just 10% in 1 year thanks to Seiko's quartz watches. There's just too much money and history and art and music tied up in the Christian Judeo-Islam faiths for them to succumb to some flash-in-the-pan religious philosophy. But it's worth a try. Now, I mind you, I do not disparage anyone for practicing the religion of their choice. Now and then, I may shake my head at some of the mysticism that otherwise heady people engage in and internalize into their core being. Gratefully, Dr. Lloyd Moffitt has done a yeoman's job analyzing why this happens. But here we are, a bunch of UUs, a mixed bag of histories, trying to make sense of ourselves, our spiritual journeys, and the crazy world out there we see via television and the internet. So how do we grapple with this newly aware idea of God's existence? Will I denounce my spiritual freedom as a fundamental agnostic and sign up for this inhumanism thing? Will you atheists out there change from a heart of stone to a God made of stone, or everything else? Will those of you clinging to vestiges of your Christian Judeo upbringing let go and come to the inhumanism side? So let's take a last look at what differentiates humanism, the current fad or belief in system of many UUs, from inhumanism. Not a fad at all, in fact, relatively unknown to just about everyone, including this community until recently. So before I start, I must make this disclaimer that I am not proselytizing. In humanism, I'm just illustrating the difference between it and humanism. First, shifting toward humanism means letting God back in, God taking the position of just being everything. This does not mean that one must practice rituals and proclaim the omnipotence of an almighty creator. Just know that God's gift is nature itself. Second, the human species humbly taking its place as a mere piece of nature's grand universal puzzle that has about a gazillion pieces. This one is particularly challenging in that it tends to discount all the glorious creations made by humans in the arts and culture. Third, shifting toward mysticism by removing all the mystical elements of humanism. As discussed before, this is a direct affront to all religions dependent on mysticism. Fourth, treating the earth and nature in general as your teacher, not as an authority, but as the ultimate authority. This one is easy. UUs often speak about the ability of indigenous peoples who learned from and respected Mother Earth. Fifth, reject the notion that upon your demise, your soul goes somewhere else and gets free harp lessons. But instead, accept the notion that the collective consciousness does not alter. You and your remains become reincorporated with the earth and its collective consciousness. You heard that expressed in that song that Colin Ferris composed and sang about vultures based on Jeffers' poem. And I quote, "On these great sails, how beautiful he looked, veering away in the sea light over the precipice. I tell thee solemnly that I was sorry to have disappointed him, to be eaten by that beak and become part of him, to share those wings and those eyes. What a sublime end of one's body, what an enskyment, what a life after death." Sixth, shut off that big spotlight focused on the human species and let the sunshine spotlight everything on earth and into the heavens. Yes, humans have exceptional cognitive abilities, but that does not diminish those innate and intellectual abilities of other creatures. As we have our own unique abilities within our species, so too do the other kinds. Just watch a few of those nature programs. They're rather amazing. So here I am about to take that big step. Oop, there you go. Taking on a new direction in life by accepting an answer to the God question and bidding a fond farewell to my glorious days of agnosticism. But all is not lost. I can still drive that convertible of free thinking, footloose and fancy-free. Nothing has really changed, except now I recognize God as everything I see, hear, touch, smell, and taste. May it be so.